We started the Amazon process probably in the summer of 2020. Yeah, and I think the other thing is that you don't know what you don't know until you know it. Yeah, you don't plan inventory well, and you buy too much, and then it chokes the cash you need to pay for marketing activities. And be passionate about what you're doing, because if you're not, you're not gonna want to do it anymore, and you're gonna stop.
I would love to know a little bit about your background. What was your job prior to owning your business? And what made you jump into being an entrepreneur?
Yeah, so my background before all this, I went to school for aviation. So I was a commercial pilot and a flight instructor. And then I went to school for aircraft mechanics. And I'd always had a dream. Well, I had two ideas growing up. And that was one, I'd always wanted to be an inventor. My mind just thinks like an inventor. I'm always looking to solve problems, and more particularly mechanical problems than human problems. And at the same time, I had a passion for aviation. And I think that's also because there was an inventive element to aviation that I saw. So after pursuing all that, coming out of school, I never really wanted to fly as a pilot full time. I got a job as a aerospace insurance underwriter, working for a company here in New Jersey that then progressed to Manhattan, where, it was your 9 to 5, so to speak, of assessing corporate jet risks and all sorts of stuff. And don't get me wrong, I worked for a great company, I had great coworkers. It was a very cushy job, as most would probably consider it, paid incredibly well. But I just never felt fulfilled. And I knew that the fulfillment was only going to come with the freedom of being an entrepreneur and pursuing the things that I'm passionate about. So that kind of lingered, and that had always been the thing that drove me to want to pursue entrepreneurship.
I love that. And why did you create this product? What inspired you?
Yeah, so I'll take a step back and say again, having always wanted to be an inventor, I wanted to pursue a life of inventing. I knew I needed to start. This wasn't the first invention, but it was one that I viewed in my eyes at the time as something that relatively small mechanically, and I could scale it. The whole world drinks from cans. So after lots of other ideas that I had pursued and spent money on, this was kind of the one where it was like, okay, this kind of ticks the business bucket and the inventing bucket. And so what inspired this was really, in a nutshell, the idea that a lot of great stuff comes in cans. This was 2011. It was like the start of the craft beer can movement. So you found more expensive beers coming in cans, but the experience drinking out of the can is just, horrible compared to every other option out there. But yet it's the most widely accepted vessel to put a beer in. You can take it on a boat or on a beach as opposed to glass. And so I said, what if the top was off? Somebody in flight school had showed me how to use your canine tooth. And there's a couple Instagram videos on it, just twisting and taking the top off. And now you can smell the aroma. It drinks like a glass as opposed to sips like a can or a sippy cup. And I said, I think there's a problem here worth solving. And so that was kind of the inspiration. Let me see if I can solve the problem. And then we test the market, which came after.
Was there anything similar or competitive at the time?
There were a few other beverage brand, what I'll refer to as marketing gimmicks. So Miller Lite had the punch top, where you would punch a hole, it lets the air out, the beer came out of the can faster. There were like the Vortex bottle and all these things that help get the beer out of the vessel quicker, which it wasn't an interest of mine. It was being able to smell the aroma of like an IPA. So a can opener, which does work, and I tell people, household can opener was the only other concept. But I said, you buy a steak knife for a reason, but you could cut a steak with a butter knife. So there's a reason why there are better products and gadgets out there, and that's kind of what I was hoping for this to be.
Yeah, and so for everyone, what is your brand name, and how did you come up with it?
Yeah, so our brand name is Draft Top, and it was intended to be very literal at the time. We were going for some SEO. I mean, it was very direct. We were kind of also hoping to show up with Draft Kings and all these other things, back in 2013, 2014, as, search engine kind of was developing more and more. So we went through a lot of names. We didn't want to be gimmicky. It's obviously not the most sexy name, but it is very literal. And so each of the products that have come from that have another variation of the name, but is also very literal. So,
yeah, I love it. And how did you find the design or the designer? Did you design it yourself?
Yeah, so my mechanical background with aviation kind of gave me the wherewithal to start. And it was literally going to Home Depot, getting stuff. It was going to, Bed Bath and Beyond, taking the household can opener, taking it apart, trying to find ways to make it more ergonomic and just better for the consumer. Than this idea of, bringing a can opener to a tailgate, for example. So a lot of tinkering. I would say 2011 till 2015, when we went to Kickstarter, was trial and error. And at some point, it progressed into getting laser or water cut metal pieces manufactured and sent to us, and then fabricating from there.
Yeah, and you mentioned here that you had a designing software that you used. Did you use that yourself, or was that part of the manufacturer?
Yeah, so I used, and I don't know if it's still around, Google SketchUp, which was 3D CAD software that was free that Google had. And so I would draw in Google SketchUp a 3D model. This is also before 3D printers and all that other stuff. And then I went on, it was Fiverr or freelance.com, found some, graphic designers, mechanical engineers, and said, hey, if I send you a file, can you convert it into a format that I can submit for quoting? And, it was a great way to do it. It was a lot of work. It was very little cost, but just hours and hours and hours of work. And then, a couple $100 here and there for somebody to convert that stuff that I can go get quotes for.
Nice. And so you can hire someone on Fiverr to create you a CAD design that you can give to a manufacturer to actually develop into a prototype.
Yeah. I mean, I'm sure there's a lot of complexity depending on what it is you're looking to do. For me, it was relatively 2D shapes. It was flat pieces of metal stacked in a way that could kind of almost replicate what our handheld version does today. And I have some samples here. This is actually the first actual production model, but you can kind of tell here that it is all flat pieces, and they swing in a way that actuates things. And so it was, for me, just playing around with shapes and geometry and then sending those files out. They were not really tolerance sensitive. And then somebody would put that into a model that would allow me to go out on public forums like ThomasNet, which is like a manufacturer's database, and search for people and say, hey, can you quote this?
Yeah, I'm familiar. And is this how you found your manufacturer?
Not the one we're using today. Actually, the one that we're using today here in the States, yes. We have another manufacturer in China that we work with, a contract manufacturer. Initially, I used that for quoting purposes to kind of get to market. And then once we were in market and knew that it was an opportunity, and this was the first Kickstarter, I had a family friend that knew somebody who sourced stuff overseas and was like, yeah, send me the files and I'm happy to help. And, and then that kind of was the thing that got us from 2015 to almost 2020.
Is that when you launched in 2015?
In 2015 was the initial Kickstarter launch. And, that was after 3 or 4 years of tinkering. And it was like, we've got to see if there's a market for it. And if so, what are people going to pay for it? And to your point about the digital world, prior to that, my co-founder, Sean Kelly, is that he brought in, because to me, it would have been, let's go knock on doors and let's go try to, the old fashioned way, see if it's a viable product, which would not have scaled at all quickly.
Yeah, Kickstarter is a great way to test it.
Yes. And it went really well. It was surprising to not only ourselves, but I think everybody else from the outside. And it was like, okay, the idea has legs. We have to work on it. But so we fulfilled all those orders. And then over the next couple of years, kind of progressed and then went back to Kickstarter in December of 2019.
December. Oh, nice. So one of the things that we try to do is, share a lot of the startup details. So some might say boring details, but it's relative to our audience because they're going through this right now. And I would like to ask questions about, design and manufacturing. So the question is how easy was it to find your initial supplier? How many manufacturers did you talk to? Was that easy to find, or did you have struggle doing it?
It's a good question. I guess it's somewhat relative in the sense that You have to spend a lot of time. You have to reach out to 20 in hopes that 2 or 3 will actually respond to you. And then when those 2 or 3 respond to you, you don't, and this is why this is maybe just different than other businesses that you would start on Amazon. It is truly an invention to the extent that there's nothing else out there. So you really don't know how many you're going to sell. So when we went to Kickstarter, most manufacturers don't want to hear a couple hundred units. That's not worth their time. They don't even want to pick up the phone or answer an email for that. But it was this idea of, well, give me some quotes for 5 and 10,000 pieces. What would that cost? And I'm certain that there was eye rolling on the other end of that email or phone to be like, all right, so, it was, I would say that kind of occurred simultaneously with the prototyping and the developing. And, it was probably realistically a good year or two. Hey, I found somebody that'll machine the cutting component, which is a turned component on the lathe. And I found another guy who will actually quote the pieces that make up the rest of the assembly, but nobody wants to be the person to put it all together. So, all right, maybe I'll just do that for the first run and we'll see how it goes. And so what made it better was right after Kickstarter, and this is one of the benefits, there's pros and cons of Kickstarter, but the ability to take that public performance and show them, hey, I now have, in this case, $214,000 sitting in account that I intend to deliver product. Do you want the business or not? And and you still do it nicely and professionally, but all of a sudden you get attention. It's like, okay, this is, it's 4,200 units. Like, all right, this is just the first run. How can this scale? So,
and how do you do Kickstarter before having any samples or even a prototype?
So we did have prototypes for Kickstarter. We had fabricated a number of versions using prototyping. They were hand finished and they were purely concepts. And so we pitched the concept and said, hey, here's the product. I don't know if we disclosed it would look a little bit different over time, but that was the proof of concept. And then from there, it was, let's make it look better. Let's make it work better, which we did. And what we ended up delivering, which was that version I just showed you, is very different than the one that was actually shown on Kickstarter. But served, a similar purpose. So
I see, and then I see that now that you put prototyping costs you around $4,000 just to test and create a sample of the invention, which is amazing.
Yeah, and I would also say for anybody listening to, I mean, that was over several years, and it was split with my co-founder 50-50. So it was palatable to the extent that it was, it was a couple $100 every once in a while over the few year period. So.
Yeah. Did you guys run into any issues or any big surprises there?
In the prototyping phase, it was constant surprises. It was, hey, this is going to work great. And then as soon as you put it together, you go to use it, it doesn't work at all. And you just hours of sitting there tinkering and working on it, you get irritated. And I don't throw things. I'm not that kind of person, but that's the feeling is like, I would just put it down. Like, I got to walk away. I can't believe I just spent 4 hours putting this thing together and it doesn't even work, But then I'd see an ad about craft beer cans, craft can movement, the world's going to, and then I'd be like, all right, it would reinvigorate me to say, keep going, come back with a fresh head and try it again. So,
yeah. So let's talk about packaging, logo design, all that fun stuff. How did you design your packaging and logo? Did you hire someone? Did you do it yourself?
So this, after Kickstarter, was our first packaging. It was a $45 product that, really looks, I don't know how well you can see here, it's real, it's real wood, it's mahogany, it's high end with stainless and brass in bubble wrap. And again, it was all means to an end. But then once we got into market, we're like, all right, so we found a company, actually it was in San Diego, that did blister packing. And we're like, hey, here's what we're looking to do. We had migrated past metal and wood and went to plastic in 2020 because we got it done here in the States. And I said, hey, can we? And so they did, we gave them the overall design. So I would go to like Michael's Arts and Crafts store, go buy some cardstock, and I would just experiment. And I would try to give them enough inspiration where it wasn't like, hey, figure this out for me, because there's just a big expense. It was kind of like, I know what we want. Is this possible? Can you do that? And it was relatively, it might have been $1,000 or $2,000 or so after the first Kickstarter to kind of concept some stuff and prototype it.
Yeah, so that's amazing. Like you were just using bubble wrap for packaging. So basically you spend pennies on packaging in the beginning. But I'm
Yeah.
guessing before you had to ship to Amazon, obviously you had to create a new version and create a logo and design for
Yes.
them. Uh,
Yeah. So for that, we did not start Amazon until the back end of 2020. It was new to us. Shopify, who is our website now, was easy to corral. It was kind of easy to figure out. Hey, you put a product up, you sell it. Our fulfillment center is down in Atlanta. We've been with them from the start. They walk us through a lot of that process. And, we're like, hey, let's expand our footprint. I mean, Amazon is where the customer is. Let's get there. And my co-founder, who's really ran that and has the most amount of knowledge specific to Amazon, was the one to kind of go through the process of understanding, hey, we need a barcode. It needs to be EDI compliant, or it needs to be GS1 or something. And he would kind of come back with that list of requirements. And at that point, we had a couple other people that joined. And all right, let's go figure this out. We'll do, was it clip art or PowerPoint to mock up some examples of what we thought packaging would look like to be, pretty cool and protect the product in transit. And then the guys in San Diego said, yeah, we can make it. And but we did at that point use the proceeds of the second Kickstarter to get like a packaging designer involved, and they helped us understand the placement. If you have a disclosure, you should get it on there, and all these things.
so until then, you were using the bubble wraps to
Bubble
ship.
wrap it was specific to the very first metal and wood tool. And, at the time it was a cost thing. And it was also just trying to get people. We fulfilled a year late, I think, for Kickstarter, which is not unusual, but people become vocal. So it was like, look, everybody just cares about the product. They don't care about the packaging. Let's just get them the product, and let's make the product as good as we can, which, it was at the time. But when we were coming out with a plastic version that was in that $19-20 range, we were like, all right, we can't just, we have to have a package, because stores and all these other things, displays, that's just how the world works. So it was around that time that we like, let's look into better options. So
Yeah, talk to me about Shopify and the distributor that you had out of Atlanta. Talk to me a little bit about that and how. So in the beginning, obviously, you had to fulfill all the Kickstarter orders that came through.
Yep.
And did you launch into Shopify right after? And did you ship the products yourself, or you use the distributor to do that?
So we use that 3PL down in Atlanta to do that. I want to say our first website might have been Squarespace or Wix. I can't remember. And then my co-founder's like, hey, Shopify is a marketplace. It's just a better, well, not a marketplace, but it's designed for, you had web templates. You had all these things that just made it easy to get a site up, collect payment, just create a digital connection to that 3PL. He was the one that was out looking for fulfillment companies. And we found this, it's a single location company down in Atlanta. And it was just this idea of like, hey, we can make a digital connection to our website. The fees were reasonable. Let's go ahead and do this. And so I don't know, at the time, we might have exported from Kickstarter and uploaded to the 3PL specifically for the Kickstarter orders. But nowadays we'll use an app to kind of distill all of those rewards from Kickstarters down into a platform that the 3PL can just migrate into their shipping and shipping processes. So
yeah, no, that's really good to know, because I get asked a lot about how to fulfill the Kickstarter orders, and I feel like a 3PL company could really help with that.
Yeah, what I would say is, and we do this now on the more recent Kickstarters that we've done, was we will tell people, hey, shipping and tax, because we have to as a business collect those things, even though it's a donation in the eyes of Kickstarter. But that digital aspect makes it easier. I think if you had 40, 50, maybe a couple hundred orders through Kickstarter, maybe it makes sense to just save on the money and do it yourself. But for us, it's not scalable. We had 3,200 people that bought it, and they were all over the world. So it was like, I don't know how to write an address to the, Asia Pacific countries, whereas
Right.
this is what they do. So there's a fee. Let's just go with that. And we did. So
Yeah, no, that's incredible. Oh, I wanted to ask you about marketing, and how did you guys sell on Shopify? How were you doing your marketing? Was it on social media? Was it all from Google ads, Facebook ads?
Yeah.
Let us know, how did you do that?
Yeah, absolutely. So going into the 2015 Kickstarter, it was all bootstrapped. It was word of mouth. It was writing to editors of magazines, journalists. Hey, here's the product we're coming out with. Would you write about us? There were a lot of things that we had done to make the most of that Kickstarter. But when we left Kickstarter, really 2016 is when we started to fulfill and actively sell the product on the website. It was there again, bootstrapped efforts, and it was passive because we still had our careers. We still worked full time, and it was small amount of small amount of like Facebook and Instagram type ads, maybe a little bit of, and I mean, maybe a couple $1,000 a year trying stuff, but we didn't understand optimization and all of these things that come into making, the most of an ad set like you have today.
Yeah. I would like to jump into launching the product. So you obviously, Kickstarter was a great success. You made a large revenue on Kickstarter, and so you stayed on Kickstarter and Indiegogo. That was your strategy for the first couple of years. That's where the biggest push was coming from.
No, so it actually went passive. We only did Kickstarter in 2015. We didn't do Indiegogo. When we did about the 214, we went into 2016 all the way to 2019 passive efforts. And so it was just selling. And we were doing roughly $75,000 a year. One of the challenges, the very first Kickstarter was intended to be a proof of concept. It was a market test. We knew that what we were getting made, that metal and wood version, was not scalable. The costs were incredibly high. The product did not perform very well. So we used that period from 2016 to 2019 to say, how do we make a better product at a lower cost in that $19, $20 range? And then when we went back to Kickstarter, and that second time we had done about 595,000 in 30 something days, then we went to Indiegogo. And then right around May of 2020, right when the heart of COVID was kind of starting, we stopped both crowdfunding and we went 100% on the website. And I think there was enough virality with the idea that you could not go buy a draft beer somewhere during COVID. And so a can was the only option, or a bottle. And that really helped. I mean, our first year went really well. Just through the website. But we did continue to do digital ads, Facebook, Instagram during that time.
Nice. So let's talk about launching on Amazon. It says here, I believe it was February of, oh no, I'm looking at the wrong sheet. It was... I
had my partner fill that stuff in, and I know we had some gaps because he couldn't get historical stuff without looking at internal records. We started...
I see 2023 was... first year on Amazon?
No, that was the furthest back he could grab without going through our tax records to look for stuff. So November of 2020 was, I think, when we first launched on Amazon. And it was a slow roll. I mean, you're permitted to send a certain amount of product in. So you start with the minimum. We had done so well on Shopify coming out of Kickstarter and Indiegogo that we had the funds to say, let's give it a try. The costs were minimal. It was shipping product, maybe a couple $100 at most.
Yeah. So compared to how much you were spending when you launched on Shopify with marketing and your landed cost for the product and the operation running fees, roughly how much were you profiting after that on Shopify?
I don't know the actual number, but what I would say is that next mistake, the one that I put on that mistakes tab of the sponsorship, that first year is probably almost 300,000 would have been in profit. And then, we just foolishly spent it on sponsorships thinking it would build awareness and bring in orders. We probably saw back about 100,000 out of the 300 that we put out. But we learned passive, sponsorship is not a active marketing channel for us. So
can you elaborate on that a little bit? What do you mean by sponsorship?
Yeah, so we had done both a Barstool Sports and NASCAR, regional NASCAR sponsorship, where for NASCAR, we were the title sponsor to the event. It was a single event, a regional race. And, our name was all over the stadium, which felt cool at the time, in hopes that it would bring enough awareness to bring in. It was also, we felt our demographic, it was middle-class Americans that just like to drink beer and probably are drinking out of cans. And then Barstool Sports, which was the other one, was like, hey, this is the younger post-college crowd, they'd love the product, so let's spend that. And so we were, showing up on certain videos during certain sessions of the things that they were doing with Barstool Sports.
Oh man.
Yeah.
How much money did you spend on sponsorship?
Yeah, it was about 300 total.
300. Wow.
Yeah.
Do you feel like if you guys use this money towards like TV ads or online ads, it would have done a bit better? Or
100%, 1,000%. Yeah.
Yeah.
1,000%. Yeah. It was, well, our product just requires an explanation. And unless you have social proof and user generated content to show that and address each of the use cases, because for some, it's about enjoying the aroma of a craft beer. For others, it's, hey, I want to put a lime in a Corona because that's what I bring to the beach. Others, it's, I want to put ice in my Coke or my Pepsi and I don't drink alcohol. So it was, there were just so many applications that to market it, us being a name on a billboard in the stadium or behind the scenes on a Barstool Sports show was just not going to do that. And but I also seem to think it took going through that to understand, all right, our product requires an explanation. The more we are in front of people and we demo, and it's firsthand. I mean, the moment you hand somebody a beer like this and you're like, hey, go ahead and drink, or even a Coca-Cola or flavored seltzer, it's that much different. We got to stop with passive sponsorship type stuff and do more active interactive marketing.
Yeah. And like I want to ask is like, why did you guys wait so long to go on Amazon? Because almost like half the country goes on Amazon looking for products, and it could have been a great way to create the awareness or just to bring it in front of people.
I would say, November of 2020, it was really the first year, because when we did Kickstarter, it was December 2nd of 2019. So it was really that last month of 19 before. So 2020 was really the first year. The reason that first off, we had to fulfill, we sold on the second Kickstarter and Indiegogo almost 23 or 24,000 tools. And our US manufacturer had to keep up with that, had to figure that out. So we started to fulfill that product in May of 2020. And then it was a question of okay, let's keep ordering. But we needed to actually have inventory in stock to start the Amazon. So we started the Amazon process probably in the summer of 2020 before checking boxes, meeting the formalities, et cetera, and then getting accepted. It might've been October that we started to ship product in. And I think the other thing is that you don't know what you don't know until you know it. And so every day is a learning lesson, basically.
Yeah, no, it's amazing. And I'm looking at the sheet here. I know you can't pull more than 2 years, but I see in 2023 you guys made almost $800,000 in revenue on Amazon and sold 33,700 units, which is pretty incredible. Congratulations on all this success. And it's a pretty cool product. I mean, I'm looking at the page right now, and it's a pretty cool product, and I can see how everyone would love to have this at their home, especially when you're someone who likes to do gatherings and invite people over, and you got cans. Why bring glasses when you can turn the can into a glass, right?
Yeah. Well, I tell
there's
people,
always issues of having glasses. Enough cups for everyone.
Yeah. And I tell people it's novel, but it's practical. So we have a lot of people that'll buy a couple. They'll keep one in the kitchen drawer, one in their cooler or their beach bag, one in their truck. You don't use it all the time. I mean, there's many times where I'll just grab a can and open it and drink it, but you have an option that you wouldn't have before. And one of the challenges, so 2020 and 21, it started off slow, $20,000 or $30,000 that year. The next year we might've gotten a couple $100,000 before it progressed to, the 800 or so in 23. One of our challenges is the product always had to get better, because people loved and then they would tell us that hey, I love what you guys are trying to do, but the execution is not great. Make the product better. So we've spent a lot of money retooling, almost every year. It's $30,000, $40,000 a year to make new tooling for a better product and then launching that product. So
now throughout this whole process, are you spending money out of pocket, or this is money coming from the business invested back into the business?
It was self-funded. until probably the end of 21, when I think having spent that sponsorship money and the lack of forecasting and planning caught up to us.
Mm.
We had also spent about $150,000 protecting the patent because we got hit with knockoffs very quickly in 2020. And so we are getting to a point where, legally protecting a patent is not a revenue generating activity. You're just burning through cash and hoping to maintain your position with your patent. And so those, I think, it's just a combination of all those things caught up to us at the end of 2021, and that's when we started needing lines of credit, just various sources of funding to make sense of things. So
Yeah, I feel like because it's the next thing that I want to talk to you about is 3 costly mistakes that you wish you have done differently, and what we can learn from it. And I feel like the biggest one was like going into sponsorship wasn't a great way, or maybe it was too early into the product or
yeah.
brand to spread that awareness, and that money could have spent in ads and spreading awareness in other areas, maybe on Amazon, on social media, on Google Ads, optimizing the website. And that's unfortunate. But like you said, that's you don't know what you don't know, and it was like a lesson learned. But I see here that you guys, and congratulations on all the success. I mean, you've made well over $1 million in this year, and from that you've made up more than the money you spent on sponsorship after all the cost of goods and marketing and all that, and that's just from Amazon. That's not what you're getting from Shopify and other sources. But I would like to jump into, like, what are 2 other mistakes that you feel that cost you money and that you could have done differently and other people can learn from, and if you go back you wish you would have done it differently?
Yeah. Well, I'll always say I don't think I would go back, even though I'd love to relive some of the redo some of those, because I might not be here if that were the case. Could be wealthy and have sold this and be somewhere else on an island. But one of those, I think, was the first one that I put there. It was the first kind of a slap in the face, was just poor tax planning. I mean, that first Kickstarter, we'd fulfilled the product and we were done. We had roughly $80,000 in true profit, and we didn't do anything about that. And that year when we filed our taxes, it was 40% of that or so roughly was gone, which was a sting. It was like we could have used that money to run ads, which is an expense that would have built the business. And so that mistake caused us to be the opposite direction with sponsors. Like, hey, we have all this extra money, let's go do sponsorships. Let's not pay tax on it. Still paying tax. Let's make it a marketing expense, not the right one, which led to the next one. And then a third mistake, I might have written, I think I wrote another one on there. I don't have it in front of me.
I have it right here. It says learning lessons along the way, many small mistakes across various aspects. Let me see what it says over here. Cash management, engineering, inventory, business IP, lack of planning and projecting, but less financial waste along the way.
Yeah.
Things that you learn from business management and business, various aspects of business management and growing that you learn along the way.
Yeah. And I think it all just adds up. You don't plan inventory well, and you buy too much, and then it chokes the cash you need to pay for marketing activities, and vice versa. You run out of inventory because you didn't plan accordingly, and you miss sales. You don't want to be doing that in the fourth quarter. So I think it was just a lot of little things, but easily adds up to probably $100,000 at this point. So
I also would say not starting earlier on Amazon is a big one that could have substantially, made a difference, especially for a cool product like this. Did you guys hire an agency to manage Amazon? I don't know if you said that earlier or not.
No, early on we did it all ourselves, and the agency didn't come into play until, well, maybe the first few months. We ended up getting an agency involved in, I think it was 2021 at some point, to help us manage that.
Yeah, I know you mentioned here there's like other Amazon fees and other fees that came with Amazon, and I'm just curious if those are like agency fees
Some of
and
them might be advertising. Again, this is where my co-founders got the most amount of experience, but I know advertising with Amazon operates differently. You allocate a certain spend, and it's a percentage of sales that comes out as fees. So that's probably, that's probably a majority of what you're seeing there.
Sure. Well, I want to thank you for coming and sharing your story. I love the entrepreneurship spirit and it's such a cool invention that you guys came up with, and congratulations on all the success.
Thank you.
And if you want to share where people can get this and some, like a mini uh, pitch on where people can get this, and if you want to share something, go for it.
Yeah, so you can actually, you can get it on Amazon at Draft Top, and we also have our own site, drafttop.com. I like to tell people, I mean, we are out to elevate the canned drinking experience because a lot of great stuff comes in them, but you should not be subjected to an inferior experience when you can buy a product that makes that experience much better. So, yeah, it's all about the experience, and it's also something where there's times you're not going to use it, and that's okay. We're not religious about it. So
Nice. And I would like to end this with if you could give a message to someone out there who's dreamed to start their own company or their own product brand, what is something that you would say to inspire them or to motivate them to do this? Or maybe your something that you would tell your younger self.
yeah, absolutely. I think the thing that I always tell people that come to me with ideas is be passionate about what you're doing. Because if you're not, the first hurdle, the first roadblock, or the first mountain you got to go over, you're not gonna want to do it anymore, and you're gonna stop. So, but if you're passionate about it, and for me, it wasn't particularly can openers; it was inventing. Uh, and you can see that, then you can see the forest through the trees. You'll kind of get through those down moments of which you're absolutely gonna hit with some energy to be like, okay, let's take a break, walk away from the problem, whatever it is, and then come back to it. So passion is, I think that driver for anybody being an entrepreneur across e-commerce or the real world, that I would recommend ensuring you have before you get into it.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you.
Yeah, you're welcome.